Hello and welcome to another episode of a Wicked Parley. Tonight we're going to be talking about ancient ruins and how do they affect you. Well, obviously this subject is going to bore the pants off of most reviewers, so I'm sorry for that. But I'm also deeply interested in this particular subject, so tough. Deal with it.
Well, alrighty then.
I know, right? I'm just so magnetic about that. That's right, magnetic, not magnetic or anything else associated with it. Just whatever, words, random. Hi, host. Hello, welcome to the show. Okay, righty then. Okay, let's get into it, shall we? So one thing I'd like to just kind of like point out is there are many definitions for ruins, and I'm curious, fellow viewers out there, what is your guys' definition of a ruin? And while we're waiting for those particular questions to come rolling in, Rose, you got any definition for a ruin? What is an ancient ruin or ruin in general?
One for what I personally think a ruin is, if you're willing to hear that.
Sure, let's hear it.
So for me, it's kind of, a location, building, an item that's pretty darn old and still has some semblance of shape. You can kind of still tell what it is, like that's a pillar or that's a fence or like stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it has some significance. Doesn't have to be a major significance, but it has some significance to somebody.
Okay. I think I kind of agree with you when it comes to your definition. While researching this week's episode, I came across a pretty darn good definition. And I feel like I'll read it for you guys. The definition I found is a ruin is that which is deteriorating, disappearing, but still has a discernible form. For example, a monument that is collapsing. A ruin encompasses the idea of the passing of time, which breaks down what was once a unit. But for a ruin to exist, there must be people to see it as such. So, to me, I think that ruins are interesting structures in general that just have something to say about the past. I see that host has a comment. Want to read it?
Yeah, so they're saying that a ruin is anything their friend with poor taste takes a liking to.
Really, host?
That one gave me that one got an eyebrow raise for me. Like, what?
That's not really what we were thinking about when we said ruin, but I mean, hey, you know what? Sure, we can go with that. I mean, a person does have to be there to witness this thing. So, yeah, and if it's bad, then who knows? Maybe you'll make it collapse. Okay.
It collapses poorly as Bombay.
Oh, dear Lord.
Granted, that one was, due to volcano.
Thank you very much.
So. Okay.
Anyways, so when it comes to ruins, I want to kind of challenge the audience with the idea and concepts surrounding what ruins mean to people. Through the discussion of trying to break down different cultures and regions of the world, we kind of settled on two regions and two specific cultures, particularly the Romans and the Egyptians. As those two particular civilizations and their associated ruins are very easily identifiable to most people, and have a great deal to say about both the culture, the people who live there, and how those people's cultures and ruins interact with people today, which is really the whole point of today's episode. So I want to kind of make sure that when we talk about this, we're not trying to say, hey, other cultures and parts of the world don't matter. It's just there's a lot of cultures out there and a lot of ruins out there, and so I just want
a little too many.
Yeah, a little too many. So if anyone is interested in any specific ruins that we don't mention, please feel free to mention in the comment section or email us or come talk to me on Tuesdays or Thursdays about it, because I'd like to hear about it and we can have a little discussion.
Yeah. So like you said before, we're only choosing two because we don't want to be here for 5 hours.
Yeah, because I feel like that'd be a little boring, wouldn't it?
Just a wee bit.
Yeah.
Oh, hello, backseat.
Hi, welcome back, Backseat. Good to see you. Okay, so when it comes to talking about ancient ruins, there's a few different approaches which I feel like is kind of important to kind of get out of the way. The main approaches to talk about are, first is the physicality of the actual structure itself. All right, this is going to be discussing things like how was it built? What kinds of challenges does it currently pose if we wanted to recreate it today? The second concept surrounding ruins and our connection to them has to do with the metaphysical consequences of structures or certain practices and religious beliefs. Because there are certain spots in the world that have special meanings for certain people. There are also structures, ancient ruins on those places that also hold significance. An excellent example of this is the Temple of the Rock in the Middle East, or you could think of the Temple of Apollo or Jupiter, in Greece, or you could think about some people hold some level of reverence for even the Colosseum in Rome. And you could also think about some of the beliefs and practices of the ancient Egyptians, as well as some perhaps people who have a level of spirituality with nods to the Sphinx and or the various temples and pyramids in Egypt. So with all those things in mind, those are some of the talking points for those 2 points. The last and most important aspect, I believe, is what would be considered the non-physical. This is like what I would specifically refer to is that it is the things that the ruins inspire in people. There's a sense of romanticizing certain aspects of culture. Roman and Egyptian culture are classically known for this, as the many stories and legends that surround them. And stories and authors that have shaped all sorts of parts of the world have been influenced by these particular cultures. And so discussing how those things have shaped, as well as the language and writing styles, are all things we're going to try and talk about today. But before we continue, do you want to read host's
Sure.
response?
They have an answer for us as to, why why they consider this to be a ruin.
Okay.
And goodness, if these are actually correct. Probably. So apparently once their friend with poor taste takes a liking to it, once they start to like it, it starts to fall apart.
Of course.
It
Okay.
becomes a hollow shell of itself.
So I'm gonna get this straight. Your friend obsesses over something and then it loses its meaning?
I don't know if it's like obsessing, but apparently just once they start to like it, it just goes by.
Oh dear God. Okay.
So
All right.
I made the comment of, I don't know whether that's interesting or terrible, so probably both, and they responded with, it's like watching a cursed monkey afflicting everyone in their path. It's horrifically funny.
Right.
Ooh boy.
Are you little?
Okay. All right, moving on.
right.
Moving on. All right. I think that one of the most important aspects of tonight's episode, that I would like to kind of discuss is I want to pose a couple of questions to the viewers, and feel free to respond in the comment section or email the show, or once again talk to us on Tuesdays and Thursdays. But one of the questions I want to ask is I want to ask, how do ancient ruins impact languages and cultures and stories in general? And while we're waiting for any responses, Rose, you got any thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I've got a couple. Nothing too deep, but this is just kind of surface thoughts type of thing.
Okay.
So, for me, they could be used as resting places for pieces of written language, people keeping certain stones with writings on them to keep them preserved from the elements, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Or even written on the walls, like hieroglyphs. So, writing down stories from the past which can influence their own.
Mm-hmm.
Well, our own. But then there's also, right now, in modern days, the interpretations of those things. Because, what they could mean in the past could be interpreted entirely different. I mean, look at English classes and what they tried to, find meaning in historical works. I was terrible at that.
Sure. Is that why you mean it's kind of like the telephone game?
Kind of like a game of telephone, because sometimes you hit the mark, sometimes it's just very, very twisted in comparison, and there's no way to tell if you're correct.
That is true. Although I would have to hope that certain archaeologists and things like that look into these things can be a little bit more accurate, or at least hold more pieces to show more evidence for certain wilder claims.
You have one piece, you come up with another story, you come up with another piece of evidence that happens to contradict that one, and now there's just a major fight.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So looks like Coast has a response.
Mm-hmm. So for our question of how do ancient ruins impact languages and stories, they say that decrypting dead languages is basically writing fan fiction. Fun to do, but never lives up to the original, according to them.
Interesting. That's an interesting thought. For me, when I think about that particular question, there's a whole bunch of ways in which I feel like ancient civilizations and the ruins themselves speak to various cultures. You could look at the way in which the Roman language was disseminated throughout most of Europe. You would not get French or Italian or Spaniard Spanish, the Romantic languages, without Latin, which is basically what the Romans spoke. And the way in which they told their stories and their great epics influenced writers like William Shakespeare in the ways in which they decided to tell stories. And if you influence someone like William Shakespeare, then I'm pretty sure you had some deal. Yeah, you might have had something important to say. So that's what's one way that I think they kind of speak to us. And when you look at like a Roman aqueduct, or you look at like the pictures of like the Colosseum, for instance, you can just see that there was a level of engineering and mathematical know-how and a level of organization that had more to do with the way in which the culture was and some of the values and some of the abilities that just were leaps like head and shoulders above all of their peers, at least in my opinion. And it showed a level of knowledge that I think that sometimes we may not be able to do, or if we do it, we don't do it to the same degree.
It is a challenge.
For sure.
A fun challenge. Well, some. Others might just get frustrated.
Yeah. And fun fact, currently, as far as I understand this, scientists have still not been able to replicate Roman cement.
That's funny.
Yeah, they've gotten the general gist. It has something to do with the ash. But our cement only lasts for about somewhere in the ballpark of around 50 to 100 years. Meanwhile, their cement lasts for thousands.
Like the thing that created these.
Yeah, exactly.
Very little to, if any, maintenance, and it's just like, how is it still standing?
Yeah, I think the more impressive thing you got to think of is that this was built during, the Roman period. Look how tall that is.
We can get it is taller than that building right there.
Yeah, so to me, something like that is kind of crazy. It also points towards a whole bunch of other things which we'll get to later.
Look at how tiny those cars are in comparison.
Can you think of anything else that specifically that you think of that can directly point to how certain cultures influenced us today?
For the physical, I would need to think on that a little more. As for language and whatnot, potentially the stories that were told or that we tell about those cultures.
Mm-hmm.
I know some people typically use them as fairy tales or stories to be used as lessons, whether that be becoming something or someone to be proud of or something to avoid, say a ghost of a murderer who committed some heinous crime and saying they're bad, you shouldn't do something similar to them, otherwise you're going to be cursed or something like that.
Okay.
Or a hero of legends that follows certain traits and something you should be proud of and want to, embody.
Okay.
I don't know.
For those people who aren't able to watch, Rose shoved her hands in the air when she said the embody.
Yeah. If only I had my model up and running.
I know, right? Okay, so when it comes down to certain other things, there's another kind of important question I kind of want to ask the audience and potentially you,
sure.
Rose.
Sure.
What ways do you think that certain thoughts have impacted our lives today? Do you think that ancient people's thought patterns have shaped the way we perceive our own lives and potentially the lives of others?
I would believe so, because we hear about them in the history books. We hear about what they did. We hear about, or we read about what they did, whether that be through an actual history book or through research papers done by archaeologists and scientists and historians of the past.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those things we, take into account with our own actions, whether that be, hey, let's not do this because look at what happened, whether that be good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be kind of just a reminder of this is where we were. Either look at how far we come, or look at how we've changed or degraded.
Oh God.
that was a really weird sentence to say, but considering there are some aspects which we're better in the past.
Dear God.
I mean, if I just had to point out one,
Sure.
I mean, the freaking aqueducts are like still a thing. Just to come up with an example that's still better.
I don't know about better, but
The concrete.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. That's fair. That's a good point. But okay.
So, kind of look at what we've improved upon, look at what we still can try to reach and potentially improve upon.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I kind of think about, and I know that I'm going to lean a lot into Roman here. Okay, I promise you, I'm not trying to pick favorites, but yeah,
Roman influenced a lot. So if it gets sick of it, just let us know.
Yeah, just let us know. When it comes down to it, though, like if you think about the way in which the courthouses in the United States are designed and like our Capitol buildings, there's a Greek Roman influence with the physical structures of our courthouses and major government buildings. We also, the way in which we conduct law is very similar to the ancient Romans. When it comes to the way there was a person who would hear out a case to determine whether or not there was worth having a trial, and if the praetors decided, hey, yeah, this was something that's worth having a trial, then they'd have an actual trial. And so, like, the semblance of how we conduct our justice system has some of its roots back in ancient Rome, and the structures which had those particular proceedings are very similar to the way in which at least the proceedings hold in the United States. So that's kind of an interesting connection if you think about it.
I'm curious as to how many connections we've got with Egypt, the other culture we were wanting to discuss today.
Well, I would say that not as many.
Oh, not as
if I'm going to be honest, not as many. But it doesn't. But it's not that it's not important. It's that Egypt's cultural beliefs are more steeped in mysticism and more steeped in like the organizations of early people. And we can really trace back a lot of the ways in which we have cultivated spiritual beliefs from that particular region of the world. And the ancient Egyptians were incredibly like good at detailing out their history, which is why we get to know about them today. So like a lot of their ancient structures, like in my particular opinion, have a more metaphysical component, which is why I'm not talking about it in this section, and why I'll be talking about it in the next section.
All right. We can leave it for now then.
Yeah, but like, I mean, you're not wrong. Like, it's just like the ancient Egyptians are many steps removed when it comes to a lot of their ruins because...
Steps.
I know, right? Hey, look at that. You imagine? Anyways.
Yeah, I can actually.
I look at that picture, I just think thirsty. Like.
Anyway.
Okay. But the thing is that like the difference between when the step pyramid was built and let's say like when like one of the last major pharaohs was around, that separates them by several thousand years. So like there's a big difference between them, and so when we talk about like how the culture influences, Egyptian culture to some extent still exists today, and is an ever evolving thing, and so it's a little bit more difficult to kind of pin down and discuss from an architectural standpoint. All we can really definitively say, no. Bad host. Just bad.
Okay.
Just bad, no.
No.
No. Anyways. Although, wow, we'll talk about missed opportunity. Anyways. But let me go one more thing that I want to kind of like discuss when it comes, before we move on to the next thing. I wanted to kind of point out the fact that there are many dead languages in the world. And Latin is considered to be a dead language, technically speaking, because no one technically speaks it. Original speakers. But yet we use many Latin words. And like as I mentioned previously, you have French, Spanish, Italian, just to name a few, are their languages are root based in Latin. Like their cores they start in Latin, and so it made me start to think about like the idea that perhaps, in some ways, our thoughts of ruins, particularly pertaining to modern times, might be interweaved with the syntax of the past languages into the modern lexicon. And that the way in which we conduct ourselves and the way we use our language, in some ways, is kind of like a ruin that you can't see. What do you think about that, Rose?
Let's see. I was reading the current comment from Backseat Feeder, so I don't believe I heard that last part, though.
Oh, okay. Well, I was referring to, the fact that we were, like, basically, the language, how we utilize our language and how it is connected to the past, and how other portions of language, particularly pertaining to Latin, how it's technically a dead language, speaks to the people through the past, basically.
I could definitely see people trying to remember it, to have some piece of their past with them, or a piece of their heritage with them. Because the same thing is kind of happening for people here in the US, where, you know, their families are kind of not from the US. So
Sure.
they come here with their own language, but then, you know, the younger generations sometimes don't know those languages, so it's kind of getting lost, at least here in the US.
Okay.
So I can see some people, you know, trying to remember the past, trying to cling on to that if possible.
Okay.
Pretty sure this is not what you meant, but
No, but it's okay. It's an interesting concept. It's a different take. But okay. Let's go ahead and respond to Backseat real quick. We're gonna read his response.
oh yeah, sure. So they were talking about that they feel that the concrete example is not fair because in modern times there's much more wear and tear than in ancient times, such as a road that was driven over would at most maybe get a few thousand crosses in comparison to today.
Yeah. When I'm referring to concrete, I'm not referring to roadways.
Weren't those like a combination of, say, gravel and really flat rocks?
Yes. When it comes to you're talking about the Roman roads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I don't think they used concrete on
No,
the roads.
they
it was mostly for the aqueducts, wasn't it?
Yeah, well,
Aqueducts and buildings?
not buildings too. Aqueducts, the Colosseum is made out of it. A lot of their bigger temples and structures are made out of it. The roads were mostly made out of, like you mentioned, crushed rocks. However, if they want to do something fancy, they would use marble.
That's kind of baffling, alright?
Yeah, but like,
Talk about fancy.
yeah, but I mean, like when it comes to the marble stuff, like it wasn't. It was like around Rome, typically. Well, it was seen in some of the larger capitals, the richer cities, basically had this. But it wasn't like every road was like, here's a marble slab, and we're just gonna go down. And it wasn't like they were just like dumping concrete like a road. That they didn't do that. They dug these little like kind of like groove areas, channels for like carts that kind of were like on rail tracks, if you want to think about it like that. And then they had like gravel pits and things like that, typically for like the roads that they kind of dug out that way, and they used like small rocks that were found near rivers to kind of like pave the path.
Well, alright.
Yeah. But when it comes to like the concrete stuff, yeah, like there's a big difference between concrete that's used today. I think the stress of concrete on modern structures, it isn't a fair example. To be fair to Backseat, it maybe talking about it isn't fair because the way we use concrete is very different from the way they used it. You know, a temple that was constructed, you know, it might be very, very heavy, but it is nowhere near as heavy as a skyscraper. You know, like it's just not. And yes, those skyscrapers are reinforced with steel, but the concrete also is bearing the load too, and that thing is not just fighting gravity, but it's also fighting the wind. and other corrosive elements. So, in some cases I can understand it. But the reason why people talk about it is the fact that like scientists have noted and talked about the strength of Roman concrete and have showcased its amazing properties and showing that it is actually superior to modern concrete.
Now I'm curious as to if they've done any experiments where they built something kind of side by side, same scale, same, to see, how long it lasts in comparison.
That would be cool. I've never heard of any experiment like that, but
Like if you get cool. A small structure that was made out of Roman concrete and then, take our modern concrete, build something very similar, if not try to match the specs exactly and see how long it goes.
Well, I would imagine our concrete, like I said, like the average building before they have to replace it is somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 100 years. Like as an example, right? The World Trade Center before it was destroyed had been refitted twice with concrete. Like they'd redone the concrete twice. So and that had only been up since this before it was destroyed. It had only been put up in I think 66 or something like that. So 66, 67. So yeah, it wasn't like it was a super old structure. And even it had a lot of stuff. But like I also mentioned, there was the whole idea of, and there's other factors involved, like air and stuff like that and how it could flow. So yeah.
Right. All right, enough about the concrete before I get buried in it.
Enough about concrete. All right, so here's a question for the viewers. What kinds of ancient ruins showcase technological advancement? And I swear to God, no one better fucking put down Roman concrete.
Roman concrete.
All right, Math Wiz, what do you think?
Like for me, it's more of a general answer because just kind of the buildings that are still standing despite the many, many, many years of low maintenance, if there even was maintenance over the time since its creation. Like, yeah, obviously they took care of the buildings when the culture was there physically. But like after, they died or whatever, or if once upkeep started
to deteriorate.
Yeah. So I would say that those is just they did something right to make it last so long. And then in a way of comparing between civilizations or parts of those civilizations that were around during the same-ish time period, say like Culture 1, Culture 2, that existed during Time A.
Sure, yeah.
It would be, for me, it's interesting to see which buildings and structures were created how and how different it is in comparison between the cultures. Like, oh, this culture had access to this material and was able to make things that lasted this long versus the other culture type of thing. So for me, it's that kind of shows some technological advancement just during the time frame too.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of interesting to see the way they redirected water. The fact that Roman, I know, their use of water showcased a real understanding of the importance of sanitation. One of the most interesting things about Roman architecture and just the way they did their city planning is that their city planning was so good that it actually was imitated many times throughout history since they started doing things. And the use of plumbing is definitely super important. Host, oh my God. Okay.
Maybe I shouldn't have pulled up the chat.
Oh dear God. Yeah, maybe not.
But as you were saying, the structure.
But I think the importance of sanitation and the awareness that, hey, you need to clean your hands, running water is important. And the idea that they actually use water to cool down their homes is something that is really interesting and something that maybe should be explored nowadays. And response to host.
Don't get me started on that.
God damn it, host. Why you gotta respond like that, man? Why is it your goal to derail the conversation every time? Every time.
All right, you're letting it derail.
Okay, I know. I'm leaning into it too hard. God damn it.
All right, so that's with the technological advancements from Rome. What do we get?
Anyway, I'm done.
What do we got about Egypt, though? Anything you can think of?
I mean, there's a whole bunch of things. I mean, like, first of all, I mean, Egyptian cotton sheets. They're lovely. Like, our understanding of how and which paper was created is it linked essentially back to ancient Egypt. The way in which we actually like kind of like draw is kind of simple too. So like, there's a lot of similarities involved with that. Okay, well said. I see something for interesting from Backseat. Am I going to read that?
Oh, the last one?
Yeah.
Yeah, so their response is about technically not, quote, ancient ruins, but Japanese castles made with no mortar and little to no nails, just geometry and craftsmanship.
Okay, so I want to let you know that yes, I pained me so much to exclude Japan from the list of ancient ruins. And
it was a struggle. It was a struggle.
it really was. Like okay, there was
We wanted to talk about them a little too much.
yeah. Let's be real here. That could be a whole nother episode.
That
But
is another episode.
but Backseat, yeah, no, you're totally right. I wouldn't even call it an ancient ruin. I would just call it an ancient structure because it's still very much functional. The other interesting thing about Japanese stuff, just as a minor tid note, so that way people know I was like, hey, I wasn't entirely crapping on this. Japanese traditions take often ancient sites and they duplicate the structures that are found there and destroy the previous one. And they do it in a cycle about every 20 years.
Oh, that one.
Yeah.
That tradition.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. It's really fascinating, and it's in Japanese culture, it's more about like the like a focus on the craftsmanship and the attention to detail than it is about necessarily like these specific like structure, which is very different than Western approaches when it comes to like talking about like historical things. So, anyways, slight detour, but love the response, Backseat.
It's a preview into.
I know, right? It's a preview into another episode. Okay. Yeah. So, there's one other thing I want to kind of point out that's really important, and try to like cue Rose because she's all about the maths. But but the geometry and the mathematics and the physics required to construct complex structures, like a pyramid or a Colosseum or an aqueduct, or many of the other ancient structures, showcases a level of engineering and know-how that baffle to some extent engineers today. Like I heard a person who was talking to an Egyptologist talk about, hey, if I wanted you to replicate one of the Great Pyramid on the Giza Plateau.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, here's 2,000 workers, and you have X number of hours, and you have to quarry these building materials. How long will it take you? And the guy like started doing the figure, and the guy was like, yeah, I can't do it. And he was like, can I use cranes or anything like that? I was like, no, you can't use cranes. Just whatever tools the ancient Egyptians had. And the guy was just like, hell no. And I remember like I was watching this program which I fucking hate but I like to laugh at. It's called Ancient Aliens, and yeah, I know. And Ancient Aliens, they had one guy who did not belong there, but I feel like they put him on there because they're like, this is the most credible person we could put on here while we're surrounded by a bunch of loons. But on the particular program, this guy who was like an actual Egyptologist had discovered like this odd tool which was kind of like a water saw, which helped them cut some of the pieces, which would have sped up the construction time like tremendously. And there was as a way of kind of explaining how the structures were assembled. And even with that particular metric, it's still kind of mind-boggling to think about. It was like something like every 7 seconds they'd have to place a stone for like 20 years or something like that in order to do it in lifespan. Right. It was some ridiculous figure. I'm like, that was definitely not the way they did it. There was something else.
There was something else.
And I don't know what it is, but there's something else. But I definitely think that like when you look at an ancient structure, there's a mystical element to it, a big giant question mark of how did this get here, and like what was the people and everything else that's associated with it.
Okay.
and I need all of you.
Alrighty then.
Anyways. Do you have any thoughts about that particular statement? Do you think the mathematical prowess that's required for some of those things is actually like interesting, or is it just like layman language?
I think it is interesting just because, they don't have all the technology that we've got today, granted. So they had to, come up with things on their own, actually have to be creative about it. Like, we're creative today, but we're creative in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to get creative in a more practical way, stuff that would actually work for them, because they don't have as many tools. They didn't have as many tools unless like something got, broken, and we haven't discovered it yet. But we've been looking quite a bit, so.
That's true. There's a
unless they, chucked it into the bottom of the ocean. We haven't seen it.
There's a quote that I came across when I was researching the subject that I think kind of speaks a little bit about to what we're trying to get at here with this particular section. Yeah, it's that one.
Okay.
The quote is done by the Roman Christian philosopher and theologian Saint Augustine. The quote reads, "One cannot conceive of the present or imagine the future without being aware of the past." And I think that like that's critical when you take a look at all things, like if you're not, even if you're just looking at an ancient ruin, or you're looking at an ancient language, or you're considering something that's happening to you in the now, and you're maybe planning for the future, you really have to understand all elements and things. And so by being able to look at something from the past, it can inspire you to better understand your present, which can then let you plan for the future better. So it's kind of like a series of steps.
Inspire or challenge?
Exactly. Are you inspired, or am I going to topple your opinion? All right.
Imagining some construction workers just going to be like, I'm going to make something better.
I have a question for the whole fun question for everyone out here. Okay. It's going to be a simple question.
Is it gonna be a fun answer?
It might be a fun answer. Could be a fun answer.
Maybe.
My question is this. When do you think the pyramids of Giza were constructed? And how long do you think it took?
Hold up. Hold a fat minute.
Hold a fat minute, huh?
Hold a fat minute. I barely remember time periods myself here. It was never a good thing for me. History just murdered me because of dates.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying ballpark it. You know what I'm saying?
Like I can maybe give an estimate of, how long a pyramid took, maybe.
Yeah, sure. Let's pick the small one, the little guy. How long do you think the little guy was?
A little guy? You mean
Yeah.
like the step pyramid thing that I was showing?
No. That's one of the earliest pyramids there is.
Okay.
No, I'm talking about like there's the 3 pyramids on the Giza plateau. All right. Okay. There's the smallest pyramid. How long do you think it took to make? How many people? First of all, let's break it down. How many people worked on it? All right. How many people constructed it, and how long did it overall take to put it all together?
Let me take a look at that thing.
Okay.
Smallest pyramid of Giza.
All right, and the audience, I wonder, do you guys want to throw out a ballpark guess about what it is? I mean, I actually genuinely don't know. I just think it's fun to kind of screw around and see what it's at. And while we're waiting,
it's let's see. Apparently, 2.3 million blocks of stone were cut, transported, and wow.
The ultimate Lego.
5.75 million ton structure. Jeez.
Yeah, it's the ultimate Lego construction right there.
Ultimate Lego construction. Imagine if it broke.
3021, built in an afternoon by a spiteful construction. Later sent back in time to mess with the story.
Just nothing. All of a sudden, boom.
I like that. 5,000 years and maybe about 5 to 8 generations, or about 100 to 160 years, 10,000 people. Those are some good numbers. That's a good number.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say something crazy.
Okay.
I think it was 10 to 15,000 people for 20
That makes
years.
sense. 20.
20 years.
I mean, I guess with that amount of people, I guess.
Like, I think these people, like, they lived there. Their whole life was building the pyramid. You know, I think that they were quarrying. There were, like, I think, like, there was, like, half, maybe, like, a quarter. Maybe let's say a quarter. A quarter of the people were working on quarrying the stone.
Yeah.
And then maybe, like, another, like, 20% were working on, like, logistics. And then the rest were all manual labor.
I can see that. Because I have a show that I sometimes watch with my household where they create a house out of nothing, and it's, like, done within 90 days. They start with a plot, and that's it.
Okay.
They start with a plot of land, and they have to just build the house from there, and they have 90 days to do it. And I'm like, pardon?
Do they have tools?
They have some tools, yeah, but they have to, like, do all the hiring and all that. So it means it would be faster than if they just, didn't. So it's like, I could see with that amount of people working on it, and if they already have the know-how, it would probably not take as long as if they didn't have the know-how.
Okay. Interesting. So what's your ballpark? What's your guess?
Like, the amount of the timing kind of depends on the number of people. Like, the more people you have, the less time I think it would take.
Throw a number of people. Number of years.
Let's say I had 20,000 people, maybe.
20,000 people. Okay.
I don't know if I am just making it even. I'm thinking if you have like 20,000 people, that structure's fucking huge. That structure's bloody huge, and I'd imagine that you would lose people, obviously.
Or you could gain people.
Or gain people, just depends on, accidents. I'm thinking, like, it'd still take, for me, I can't, if they already know the know-how, I'd say maybe, like, 30 to 50, maybe?
30 to 50 years?
Maybe?
Okay, alright, 30
Because it's just, like, it's so big.
Yeah, okay. 30, so you're saying...
They
20,000
have to,
people
build
though.
it from the bot. I don't know, like, maybe a little less because of 20,000. Like, if it was 10,000, maybe, like, the actual 50, but, like, 20,000, maybe, like, 30 and less. Because it's like, you have to start from the bottom, and it's like, how do you carry all that without a crane? Like, how many people have to pull or push or
Do you know
get
what I
it
think?
onto a thing that'll move?
Here's my thought, is how do you feed and clothe a workforce like that?
I would add years for that. Because, cultivation of, the food source and produce, and, like, what happens if you have a bad year? Like, a lot of people are gonna die.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, I want to leave us on. Well, actually, I want to respond to Backseat real quick.
Okay.
The last one he said.
Let's see. Backseat says, I think it was easier to build in the ancient ruins because they had, quote, simple tools, unquote. In modern times, our tool, and so many parts that any piece that falls is a setback.
Fails as a setback. Okay, yeah, I mean, I agree with that to some extent. I think that, like, it's not so much the tools, but our technique has improved. When it comes to the ancients, like, builders, like, but I agree with that to some extent. I also think that, like, people just aren't willing to build structures, like, as big as the ancient, like, structures of the past. I don't think anyone's sitting there going, you know what, I'm gonna build a fucking pyramid out of stones. like no one's doing that.
Well, at least not to that scale.
Yeah, at least to that
You
scale.
see the mini scales.
Yeah.
Like the 1 to 20 scale.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know. Like, when it comes to all those things, like, I don't know. I don't see anyone just, like, hammering a pyramid together.
Ting, ting, ting,
But
ting,
yeah.
ting.
One thing I want to also mention is the fact that there are many ancient structures around the world. All right, like, there's, like, Stonehenge, which is, famous. There is, of course, like, the Great Wall of China, and there's all the special Buddhist temples throughout a whole host of Asia that are very amazing. And if you guys are interested in hearing us talk about that or wanting to discuss it with us, let us know. Let us know in the comment section. Like, hey, yeah, I would really like to see you do another episode like this, or come talk to us and tell us about it. Okay. All right. Well, this has been a fun little episode. I enjoyed it very much. Thank you very much, host and Backseat, for coming and participating in the chat. I look forward to seeing you guys next Saturday. And if you get a chance, come say hi on Tuesdays and Thursdays. With that being said, I hope you guys have a fantastic night, you beautiful people. Later, everybody.